So on my right, we have my colleague Sharif Mansour, Program Coordinator for the Middle East and Northern Africa region at the Committee to Protect Journalists. And he'll kick us off for about 5 minutes, and then we'll turn to the author of the report, Namo Abdullah, who is the Bureau Chief in Washington for Rudal, a Kurdish TV channel. Thanks.
Thank you again for coming. I want to highlight just a few points about this report. And since we are covering the Middle East, it's a very troubling region. I'm sure everyone will raise the question, why are we tackling Iraqi Kurdistan? We have a region that's going through a transition. Last year, it was the most dangerous region for journalists. The top 3 countries where journalists were killed last year were Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. Those were like 2/3 of the cases of killed journalists in 2013. We also have a region where a lot of transformation is going on, including the Arab Spring and including also counter measures by the leaders of those governments to go after dissent, including journalists. Kurdistan is important for those reasons. As Courtney said, we have a region where killing journalists is very prevalent. We've recorded a lot of cases, specifically in Iraq as a whole. Iraq as a whole have had the largest number of killed journalists over the last 10 years, and it's also had the largest and the worst record in prosecuting attacks on journalists and cases of murder against journalists. But for the longest time, Kurdistan, Iraq was much better in terms of their press freedom than the rest of Iraq. Most of the violence did not reach the region, and for a while, the region has been better in terms of addressing press freedom issues. It wasn't until maybe 2010, 2011, when there was a lot of call for protests. A lot of people have started doing independent reporting, and we see more and more the government and a lot of the political parties engaging in attacks against journalists. This is one of the reasons why we're doing this report. We've seen 2 murders. Namo is going to talk in details about them, of journalists that have not been solved, investigated fully to the full extent of the law. And also, we want to see the impact of these 2 murders. We say that killing of journalists is the ultimate form of censorship, but it's not the only. There are a lot of fear that results from it. People start self-censoring, and if there wasn't like an immediate and serious reaction by the government, those attacks against journalists send a chilling effect to the journalistic community, which becomes more and more prevalent and important by time. The more the government is lacking behind on holding perpetrators of attacks against journalists, the more journalists feel threatened. When we say that over the last 3 years alone, one of our local partners, Metro Center, have documented 700 attacks of journalists. Most of them have gone unpunished. You can see the amount of prevailing sense of impunity. We also, as an organization, feel an obligation to speak on behalf of journalists who cannot speak and who could not express concerns about their environment. So that's why we're doing this event. That's why we're doing this report, is to advocate on behalf of those journalists, raise awareness about what they are facing on the ground. We say that for every killed or for every imprisoned journalist, dozens are silenced. We don't want that to continue. We don't want that to be something that people remember when they think about Kurdistan, Iraq. And that's the third point I want to finish with. Kurdistan, Iraq has been hoping to become a beacon for democracy in the region, and there were a lot of positive comments from the leadership about how they support journalists and how they want to see an improvement in the record of attacks on journalists. And we've been engaging with the Kurdistani government. We asked for their comments on the finding of this report. Unfortunately, we didn't get feedback in time, but we mentioned in the report that we'll continue to have this engagement. And one of the things, we also send them an advance copy of the report, hoping to also get more confirmation from the government. And most recently, 2 days ago, President Barzani have said some encouraging comments about how the government should work on allowing the press to work freely. We want to see those comments and those encouraging signs implemented, and we want to continue working with the government on improving their press record. We are sending a delegation next month, third week of May. Namo and I will be part of it, in addition to senior leadership from our organization and also our board members. And we have already gotten confirmations that we will be meeting with senior members of the Iraqi Kurdistan government. And we're hoping with dialogue, we're going to be able to arrive at a roadmap that will improve the situation better. We're also going to talk to local partners, media organizations, and civil society organizations. So this is why we're doing this report. This is why it is important to us, and this is why it's important to journalists worldwide, but also, most importantly, in Kurdistan. I wanted to read these 3 points, and then I'll turn it over to Namo, who can talk about what he wrote.
Okay. Thank you so much to all of you for coming. As Sharif rightly said, that Kurdistan, there's definitely a lot of good stuff to say about Kurdistan too, but what we are focused here in this report is the issue of impunity in Kurdistan, where, as Sharif also noted, Metro Center has documented more than 700 attacks on journalists, including arson, the physical abuse, threats against journalists and their organizations, and most of them have gone unpunished. I'm going to highlight just a couple of points and then go into some of the details and how I reported them and why I thought they were necessary to be mentioned. The first one, I'd like actually to start with a less serious case. 3 years ago, a group of independent Kurdish reporters came together with an amazing goal in mind, establishing the first Kurdish language independent television station. And that also meant putting an end to the monopoly of broadcast journalism by the ruling elite. So one of those journalists was Tuana Usman, who had previously founded the first independent Kurdish newspaper, Hawlati, in 2000. So they decided they will establish NRT as the first Kurdish television network. Apparently, after a careful study and consideration on where to build NRT, they chose German Village, which is one of the safest, most upscale residential gated communities where affluent expats and basically oil investors can afford to live. So Tuana and his colleagues thought it was safe to build NRT there. Sorry. But apparently they were wrong, because just after 3 days into the launch of the station, all the studios were turned into ashes. The television station was burned down, and 3 years have passed since that arson attack. Now, we ask, where are the perpetrators? Who committed that crime? Well, the court says, sorry, there's no enough evidence for that brazen attack. In other words, it wasn't brazen enough. Like burning down an entire television station in the heart of Suleimania by 50 people, 50 armed men, according to the NRT manager, Tona Osman. Nobody knows who did it. It's a mystery that remains today. And of course, when things like that happen, and there's no full justice, like people get scared. When you talk to journalists in Kurdistan, they are scared. They say they must self-censor when they touch topics, sensitive issues like religion, social inequality, and perhaps more importantly, corruption associated with powerful officials and tribal leaders. So this is, of course, there are few journalists who refuse to be intimidated. One such journalist is Kawa Germiani, who was living in Kalar. It's the ground zero for the Saddam Hussein's Anfal genocide near Suleimania. His family members, many of them, were lost in the 80s in the genocide campaign. And her families never thought that what would happen to their son about like 20 years later, and in a free region ruled by Kurdish people. So Kawa Germiani was the editor-in-chief of Rayal magazine, which is an independent monthly publication in Kurdistan, where there were so many articles about corruption associated with powerful officials. And one journalist told me about Kawa. There was something special about Kawa that made him stand out among his colleagues. While many people were afraid to mention officials by name, he told us who was corrupt. He named them, and he said, you know, that's a red line here. So that's apparently Kawa was shot dead like in December in front of his home, and early in December in Kalar. So you can see, you know, like there are still journalists who refuse to be intimidated, but there's sometimes a price to pay for that. Now, like Kurdistan really claims to be one of the most democratic regions, at least the most democratic part of Iraq. And even the United States has actually seen Kurdistan, has long seen Kurdistan as a model for the rest of Iraq. And it is definitely safe compared to the rest of Iraq. It has gone through a lot of progress. But impunity can and must end in this region, really. Like in a region heavily dependent on Western protection and foreign investment, the issue of impunity should be solved. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you, Dama. I think we will have time enough for everyone to ask any questions. We need to clear the room by 11, and we also need to have some time also for one-on-one interviews. So if anyone has any questions about the specifics of the report, please address to either of us. Or also we have actual copies here and press releases summarizing some of the findings of the report.
Karwan Zabari with the Kurdistan Regional Government's representation here in Washington. I have read through half of the report. I haven't had a chance to finish it, but I do look forward to looking at this, and particularly the recommendations that you suggest at the back of it. Obviously, as you mentioned, Kurdistan is part of Iraq. In your report, did you make any comparisons between the freedom of press and the rights of journalists compared to the rest of Iraq? I'm not going to ask any questions or comment on any particular cases until I had full chance to fully read this report. Thank you.
Definitely, in the report, we acknowledge that Kurdistan has a press law that's more progressive compared to not just Iraq, most of the regions in the Middle East, but it falls short of meeting the international standards because there are so many vague prohibitions, such as sowing hatred among the people, divulging into details of private citizens, and writing about religious symbols and sacred symbols, things like that. There are so many vaguely worded prohibitions which journalists, independent, at least independent and opposition reporters working for opposition television stations tell me that these words can be interpreted arbitrarily by the government to stifle the dissent, and they have a history with that. So I think they have all the right to be worried about those vaguely worded bannings in the report.
Balen Saleh from VOA Kurdish Service. Namo, thank you very much for this opportunity and talking about the freedom of press in the Iraqi Kurdistan region. I have several questions, but I'll conclude it in little 2 or 3 questions. First one, you mentioned for the case of NRT TV and Kawa Garmiani, but I wonder why you are not mentioning the killing of Suran Mahama in Kirkuk, Sardash Usman in Erbil, and Dr. Abdel Sattar Tahir Sharif in Kirkuk too. My second question, you know better than me that Iraqi Kurdistan has been divided to 2 different ruling zones between the green and the yellow one. Why I don't see any independent media, even a single office in Erbil? Could you please elaborate more than it?
That's a great point. I've actually mentioned Sardar Usman case in detail. Probably there's more detail on Sardar Usman than on Kawa Garmiani in the report. And Sardar Usman was one of the first journalists who was kidnapped in Erbil in front of his university in May 2010. And he was taken, despite checkpoints on the road between Erbil and Mosul, he was successfully taken to Mosul and found dead there 2 days later. This is according to security forces. So Sardar Usman's killers are, according to his family at least, and his colleagues, are yet to be prosecuted. The Kurdish government, or as he pointed out, basically it's about 2 political parties. It has been like that. The Kurdistan Democratic Party, which has been dominant in Erbil, and Duhok, which is geographically near Turkey, and then the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, or President Jalal Talabani's party, is in Suleimania. So the 2 cases that I mentioned earlier, NRT and Kawa Garmiani, they both had happened in Suleimania. None of them was in Erbil. That's why. So he criticized me for not mentioning any case in Erbil and Duhok. So Sardar Usman happened in Erbil, and as I said, his family, I've talked to his brother, Sardar Usman, he still believes that the whole thing was fabricated and the whole investigation. President Barzani had formed a committee, an anonymous one. Nobody knew what the members of the committee was, and he didn't even, but actually some people don't know if a committee ever existed to investigate into the murder. And then after a few months, they came up with some sort of result, like the security forces announcing that Sardar Usman was killed by terrorists, by Ansar al-Islam. And then so many people questioned that, including Bakhtiar Ali, who is the very prominent novelist in Kurdistan. He said this is a brazen lie, because why would Ansar al-Islam really kidnap him to Mosul and then shoot him to death there? Why wouldn't they shoot him just in front of his home in Erbil, which is an even bigger achievement for the terrorist group, which has not been able to carry out any attacks in Erbil in Kurdistan for a long time. So that didn't really satisfy many people, and people still continue to hope that the real perpetrators, the mastermind, will be brought to justice. That's that case. And Soran Usman, he mentioned that he was killed in Soran Muhammad, sorry, he was killed in Kirkuk, which is out, like legally out of the Kurdistan region's jurisdiction, so that's why we didn't cover that. And as I said, there is also a limitation in scope and time too. We wanted to cover the attacks from Sardash Usman until now and see how those attacks have shaped the climate of impunity in Kurdistan and self-censorship in Kurdistan. How, because of those attacks, now people are like exercising self-censorship in touching certain sensitive issues.
Thank you. I think there are two key words here that I think we need to talk about. The case of Osman is one of those cases. Is that he's an editor young guy who basically dared to write an article saying, "I want to marry your daughter," and he was addressing or something like that. It was very personal. It was maybe a taboo to go after someone in the leadership. And this is kind of like the whole concept of censorship and why it is creating this chilling effect. If someone is crossing the line and then found dead, and then the government say, like a terrorist was responsible, it's not conceivable. It doesn't satisfy the public. It doesn't satisfy the families. Mm-hmm. And we've had people from the families also complain about how not just the government is putting scapegoats, but also the government is not allowing them to seek justice inside the judicial system. And that's an important point. People across the spectrum have said that they don't have confidence in the judicial or security systems in Kurdistan. And there are structural reasons for it, including political affiliations and also the ability of the ruling elites to infiltrate and hire judges, security leaders, which make it impossible for a lot of these cases to result in actual justice. This is important because when we talk about masterminds, the real responsible people, this is a tough situation, and it needs an independent judiciary and also empowered public to call for justice.
You had another question?
Thank you. Just I'd like Sharif to add something for you. I read that article by Sardash, "I'm in love with Barzani's daughter," more than 10 times. I was trying to find just something legitimize the thing that has done against Sardash. I don't know if you read that article or not, but basically he's talking about his life as a young person. He was on the steps to graduation from college. He was talking about the failure of the youth people. Just in a way, it was not acceptable for some tribes or some families. Sardash was saying, hey, we are living in failure. Please take out every single one of us as a youth people from this failure. And he was killed because of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we take another question?
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to touch on a couple other points that you necessarily portray Kurdistan in negative, yet you don't address it in a broader sense. I'll give you an example. Every culture, every society has sensitivities. I don't think anywhere in the world there is 100% free press. I'll give you an example. If you were, as journalists, to create a cartoon depicting Prophet Muhammad of Islam today in the United States, you'd be in a lot of trouble. And I think we saw this all across the world from that Danish cartoon, and we saw another example when the pastor in Florida tried to burn Qurans. I think the government tried everything and it interfered as much as it could to make sure that didn't happen, fearing the backlash. Look, the Kurdish society as you mentioned, Namo, that is heavily tribal. And there are sensitivities. And there are things that will get you in trouble should you dare to cross it. Politically, you can accuse anyone, not necessarily accuse, but hopefully you have data to back up with, because we've seen cases where a journalist will write something based on absolutely no facts. And they go about their day without anybody touching. And you would think, if you look on the other hand, you would think there should be some going after, for lack of better words, going after this. Where did you get these facts? What are your sources? You don't necessarily have to reveal your sources, but it's got to be based on some truth. So what I want to touch on is I'd like you to address the fact that there are sensitivities. That's one thing. I'm not necessarily defending KRG or Kurdistan Regional Government that it's transparent 100%. It's got freedom of press all across the spectrum. No, not necessarily. Look, this is a government. This is a democracy that's new and emerging, and it's learning every day. In reality, when you look at it, it's only 11 years old. You cannot possibly compare Kurdistan Regional Government to the United States or the oldest democracies in Europe or Greece, for example. So that's why, per my previous comment or question, how much do you compare Kurdistan region of Iraq to the rest of Iraq? Look, this is a culture, this is a society that was deprived, that was isolated from the international community for 3-4 decades under the dictatorships of Saddam and many others that came before him. So we can't necessarily possibly be transparent 100% and have 100% freedom of press. So that I wanted to see if you could touch on the cultural sensitivities, the new and emerging democracy, and perhaps maybe you do have it in your report. Where do you see going from here? Do you see it getting better? Do you see it getting worse? Is the new and emerging political parties and new TV stations and new media outlets, is this a good sign or is this a bad sign? If you could touch on that as well. And then also, in your report, I read it earlier this morning, Sengawi's case. You already make a determination that this is a closed case and that's it, he's free to go. Not necessarily. This is an ongoing case. Sengawi was called back to the court a couple weeks ago on more details as they emerged. But Sengawi...
On that point, Kakaran, do you personally really believe Sengawi will be prosecuted, will be put behind bars? Just answer that.
Can we comment on an ongoing case? I can't give you my personal, because I'm talking here on behalf of a government, but we cannot comment on an ongoing case. We have to wait and see. The president has said, look, we will do everything we can to make sure that the perpetrators are brought to justice. So these are 3 points I'd like to see you comment on, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think we will have a chance to have a meeting later today where we can talk freely about all of these points. I will just say some general comments, and I'll ask Namo as well if he has specific details. We are an NGO. We hold all governments accountable to press freedom principle that's enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Kurdistan is not an exception, and it's not a particular country that we solely cover. We cover the U.S., we criticize the U.S. in a big report that we launched in October last year, and we were very critical of the Obama administration on many issues. We cover all the world, and we are not shy on criticizing and calling on every government to uphold the best practices in terms of press freedom. And we have said it. We know Kurdistan is better than Iraq, the rest of Iraq. It's not just because of the data. The data clearly shows that there are, but also in terms of the ability of journalists to work and operate. And that's why we feel there is a room for improvement. And that's why we know there is possibilities if we do engage with the government. And that's why we're going next month, and that's why we're opening this dialogue. When we talk about sensitivity, we have to put it into context, and we have to basically define what is it. and how does it compare not to the rest of the region, to the standards internationally accepted. And I think when we are able to have those discussions honestly about what can be done and what should be done, I think we'll find a lot to be done that doesn't take us to comparison about what's worse, but what's better, not just for the government, for the rest of the region. If you have specific.
I mean, you make really some good points, but the issue here is not cultural sensitivities per se. The issue is impunity. It's purely related to the government. When something happens, even if it's because of culture, the Kurdistan regional government has passed a law. This issue is a little bit unrelated, but in the broader cultural sense, it is related. It has passed a legislation that bans honor killings, killing a woman in the name of honor for having premarital sex or having sex with somebody outside marriage. So this is banned in Kurdistan. Now, if you do honor killing, it's a normal murder. This is a culturally sensitive issue. When the law is there, you have to enforce the law. The problem we have now in Kurdistan, the law is not enforced when it comes to journalists. There are 700 attacks on journalists, according to Metro Center. Few, if any of them, have ever been brought to justice. Few, if any of them have been prosecuted. So this is the problem. It's not about cultural sensitivity. I know there are things that are culturally sensitive. I know I must myself self-censor when I talk about certain things. And I know these things are not social change are not an overnight phenomena. They take time. We need to wait for certain things to happen. But law enforcement is, I think, the first step. If law is not enforced, then what is the difference between a civilized society and an anarchic jungle place? That's the role of law that separates the two.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the newcomers? Anyone? Hi.
I'm Raya Barzanji from USIP, and I do apologize for coming in late this morning and having missed your presentation. But and I look forward to reading the report and learn more about the research and also about your organization. What I'm curious about is that how do you compare the Iraqi journalists who are coming to the Kurdistan region from other parts of Iraq to set up shop or to work as journalists, whether freelance journalists or join media organizations over there, and some of them have actually set up news agencies based in Erbil, and then some of them are going beyond journalism to set up think tanks and organizations that are concerned more about divulging information about specific abuses or discussing certain taboos in society. How do you see that? Have they been subjected to the same restrictions, or are they playing by the same rules, or are they somewhat a little bit removed from all these restrictions because they're not they're not Kurdish necessarily, or they don't abide by tribal laws, or how do you view their situation over there?
Well, I think in general we at CPJ have a very wide definition of journalism, and Courtney explained earlier that everyone who engages in compiling and distributing information and a commentary about issues of public interest, we consider journalists. So that we include in that bloggers, for example, people who use social media. And in the report, there was an indication about how more and more there is independent coverage and people are doing more innovative structures and also over social media to escape this kind of political influence on traditional media. I will let it up to Namo if he has seen any evidence that there is difference in how the government deal with those newcomer?
Like clearly, like local journalists are most vulnerable in Kurdistan. If you are not a local journalist, I mean, I have no example of a foreign journalist or foreign NGO member being killed, intimidated, or anything in Kurdistan. And there's like a good reason for that as well. The Kurdistan regional government, which has been promoting itself as an investment-friendly region, they don't want to, obviously, they don't want to stain their international reputation, and they want to make sure that Kurdistan is safe for every foreigner who goes there. So it is perhaps the safest place in the Middle East for a foreigner. And I mean, I haven't even read in publications any bad experience happening to a foreigner in Kurdistan.
I actually meant other Iraqis, not necessarily foreigners. But, you know, Iraqis who come from Baghdad or from other places, and you know, like Aswat al-Iraq, for example. You know, this is an organization that is owned by a non-Kurdish person who is working in Arabic.
They could be more in trouble, but I don't really have any evidence to back that. But I think like if you are like an Iraqi or Kurdish, you are automatically more vulnerable to attacks.
All right. We have a meeting later today too. We can discuss in details. Any other questions? Do you have anything else before
Well,
we shut down?
before we wrap up, you know, I would maybe like to hear just briefly from you about what are some of the key recommendations or asks that you have for the Kurdish regional government, as well as for other actors that influence on the impunity. If you can just talk a little bit about that, and then we can wrap up.
Sure. Well, we have the last page of the report, and please be encouraged to take copies. We have 3 languages that you can choose from or have multiple. The last copy is divided into recommendations to the government, to political parties, and to international community. In terms of the government, most of it is about enforcing the law and sending the right messages, basically about lack of interference and political interference in the business, the journalistic community, but also collaboration with international agencies, including UNESCO, under the Fighting Impunity plan, basically to hold people accountable who've perpetrated those murders. In addition, engage in legislative reforms. For example, we talked earlier about how the press law, however, is better than the rest of the region. There are still some ambiguous parts of the law that will allow the government to hold journalists and detain them and question them and harass them. There is also legislative amendments to make to influence the rule of law aspect, abuse from government interference, including, we mentioned one of the cases in the report, Shirwani, who's a critical journalist who's been detained more than once because he writes about critically about the government, and he was held in a long investigation. These are things are happening in spite of the law and protections that already exist in the press law. These problems of implementation of the law need to be resolved. Under specifically the UNESCO plan of action, I think we can have Courtney, she's our advocacy director. She can detail some of the work that already has been done that we can build on. But I'll also ask Namo if he has more kind of like details about the most important priority recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, like all those recommendations, I think, are really like the best recommendation. That I think there's just one point that I think you forgot to mention is in Kurdistan. one of the biggest problems is that you don't really have an institutionalized security force that abides by, say, an institution, such as the Ministry of Interior. We have Ministry of Interior. That's, in theory, supervising all the armed forces. But in reality, the Kurdistan Democratic Party, which is dominant in Duhok and Erbil, and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, which is dominant in Suleimania, they have their own militant wings, militant forces. And those, like basically militias, are the maintainers of security in their respective strongholds. So that's the problem. Like when you are in Suleimania, the security forces do not respond per se to the Ministry of Interior. They respond to their party leaders, their loyal leaders. So that makes law enforcement way more difficult. And it's been a big challenge for the Kurdish government. They have never been able to solve this problem. And I think like the international community can help the Kurdistan regional government in institutionalizing its security forces and bringing all of them under one body, one governmental body, rather than being directed by the parties.